أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وآلاف التحية والسلام على نبينا نبي الرحمة محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين والبراءة من أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء ما خاب والله من تمسك بكم وأمنا من لجأ إلى حصنكم وفاز من والاكم وسار بنهجكم فيا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما قال الله العظيم في كتابه الحكيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وذروا ظاهر الإثم وباطنه إن الذين يكسبون الإثم سيجزون بما كانوا يقترفون. Renounce outward sins and the inward ones. Indeed, those who commit sins shall be requited for what they used to commit. This holy verse, in this holy verse, our beloved and mighty Lord, Allah glorified and exalted, commands us all, commands all of humanity to avoid all sins, sins that are committed in private and sins that are committed in public. Among the prominent examples of sins that are usually committed in public are those that are committed via the cyberspace, especially in social media platforms. In this lecture, I want to highlight 5 of these sins that are frequently committed with the use of social media, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Many times, people who use these platforms are not aware that certain acts that they do, as simple as liking a post, sharing a post, commenting on a post, redirecting a post. And here we're not talking about just Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're talking about even WhatsApp, for example, forwarding a message and so on and so forth. Sometimes these things are done in a very fast way without thinking about them, right? We just receive the message, we send the message. The post, we give it a like or we give it a share and so on and so forth, without knowing what this would entail. So what are these sins so that we can be mindful of them before we engage in them, wal-'ayadhu billah. We can please adjust the sound just a little bit. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Number 1, promoting false beliefs and unlawful practices. Now this sounds very general. What do you mean, promoting wrong beliefs and promoting unlawful practices? When a post incorporates or includes something that calls for atheism, for example, or calls for a wrong belief, something that is not considered Islamic, something that goes against the Islamic values and Islamic belief system, and I tend to just give that type of post a like, I don't even have to believe in it. I don't even have to accept it. Just by me liking that post, I am indirectly supporting the promotion of that wrong belief. Sometimes, well, it's a friend who's a non-Muslim, and I have to be nice, so every time they post something, I just give them a like because they give my posts a like. Not knowing that by giving them a like, I'm being part of the promotion of that wrong belief. Someone might say, but just giving a like is promoting a wrong belief. Yes, my dears. In the virtual world, in the cyberspace, and these social media platforms, this means a lot. The more likes this gets, the more it's distributed or disseminated, or even becomes very popular among different groups and different people. Another example of that would be, for instance, supporting the unlawful acts, such as anything that is considered haram in Islam. For instance, somebody posts a video and that video has unlawful music in it. Someone might say that I am not in support of the unlawful music in that video, but there is a certain message that I like in that video. It doesn't make it right that because there is a good message in the video that you support that video by liking it or sending it or forwarding it, simply because it has something that is considered a violation of Islamic law, and that is unlawful music. Likewise, for instance, ideas or things that promote marriage of the same gender. Wal-'iyadu billah. All these things, my dears, we are not permitted in Islam to show any type of support to them. Because supporting anything that is unlawful, supporting anything that is haram, is in itself a sin, a major sin in Islam. So this is number one. To support something, whether directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, that is against the Islamic belief system, against the practices of Islam, is considered a way of supporting batil, supporting falsehood. And let me share this narration by the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And this is reported by Al-Amudi in Ghurr al-Hikam. He says, one who is pleased with the action of a group is like one who participates in it with them. And for everyone who participates in falsehood, there are two sins. The sin of being pleased with the sin of acting upon, and the sin of acting upon it. So there are two sins involved here. When a person is pleased with that sin, and a sign of being pleased with that sin is, of course, giving a like to that post, or sharing that post, or forwarding that post. That in itself is a form of being pleased with that sin, and of course being engaged in it. So there's two sins that a person would receive for liking and for being part of the support to these types of unlawful acts that promote falsehood. Another major sin that is commonly and frequently committed via social media is disseminating misleading information. What do we mean by that? Information that we post or like or share on social media, some of it, if it's wrong and we don't intend to mislead people, it's not considered a sin if that information does not lead to serious harm. But sometimes that information we tend to support or forward or share unknowingly, but could have serious harm. And I'll give you a real example. When the COVID-19 pandemic transpired 2 years ago, we started seeing different views in social media about how to deal with this pandemic. And I'm not going to get into the vaccine issue here, because we do have different views, right? And we respect everyone's view. However, when a person either posts something, writes something, or forwards something, a video, a post of someone who's recommending a specific way of dealing with this pandemic, and they are not sure that this source is reliable medically, the source is not a professional source, they just share it because they received it, and God forbid someone acts according to these wrong instructions and something ends up happening to them, and that would be a great sin on that person, because they have supported these information or this type of information that is not based on science, that is not based on knowledge, and that information which is misleading to others. You see, so certain information, when people act upon them, cause serious harm, are different than information that whether you act upon them or not, it doesn't make a difference. Islam says when you transfer information, you have to be very accurate that this information is reliable. Another example of that would be that which is related to religion, Islam, especially fatawa. You know, sometimes we receive a fatwa, and I remember also in the beginning of the pandemic, I saw these fatawa that said, His Eminence, Sayyid al-Sistani, says that this month of Ramadan there's no fasting because it's coronavirus, you have to stay hydrated. And of course this had no source. This was not based on anything, just assumptions. Somebody wrote it, posted it, and people, when they receive it, they start forwarding it. You know, good news everyone, no fasting this month of Ramadan, thanks coronavirus. But that was not the case. So what do we do here? When a person receives a fatwa or sees a fatwa online, they have to first make sure that the source is reliable. Does it come from an organization or a alim or someone who we trust has derived this information from the marja'iyah, from the right source? Another example would be the ahadith that sometimes are circulating via WhatsApp, for instance, and that have no source. Again, we're not trying to tell people do not forward ahadith. That is a beautiful practice, my dears, that we try to spread the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but we have to do it right. There are certain things that come to us that sound good, but they have no source. And because they sound good, we say, you know what, let me forward it to everyone on my contact list. What if it ends up being something that is false? You know, someone also in this pandemic posted an Arabic poetry that talks about coronavirus and attributed that poetry to the Commander of the Faithful. Now, as you know, people who love the Commander of the Faithful and believe that he has this special ilm, we are more excited or more likely to interact with that type of poetry and post it because we want to show people that, look, Imam Ali alayhi salam knew about coronavirus 1400 years ago, so let me let everyone know, not knowing that when someone who is well versed in the Arabic language sees this very weak poetry, they're going to start saying, really, this is your Ali ibn Abi Talib? This poetry is very weak. It does not meet the standards of eloquence. And you say your Ali ibn Abi Talib is the most eloquent after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. You see how we can harm our beliefs, harm our Aimma alayhim salam with ignorance. So we have to be very careful when receiving these types of information, when supporting it, and when giving it a like or sharing it. Because if we do that and it ends up being information that is wrong, then we take responsibility. I'll share with you a ruling that we have that pertains to Siyam related to this matter. Ulama say, based on obligatory precaution, if somebody attributes a lie to Allah, the Messenger, or one of the Imams, their fast would be invalidated. And an example of that, they say, is when you say that the Prophet said, and you say it with certainty, and you have no proof that he said it. They said this will invalidate your fast. Say, but I heard this hadith somewhere. Yes, but there's a way of transferring this hadith. If you heard this hadith, you can say that I heard this hadith from this scholar. Or you can say that this hadith is in Al-Bihar. You probably have seen this throughout the lectures I deliver. I try my best to mention the source of the hadith. This is something we learned, that never quote a hadith if you don't know the source of it. Why? Because just in case this hadith ends up in the ilm of Allah not being reliable and that Ahlul Bayt did not say it, because we don't know for sure that they have said all these ahadith, then at least I'm not responsible for quoting it. Rather, I'm giving the responsibility or setting the responsibility on the shoulder of a Shaykh al-Kulayni, for example, the author of Al-Kafi, the one who narrated it, or Al-Bihar, Shaykh al-Majlisi, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, and so on and so forth. So again, one of the frequently committed sins in social media is the spreading of misleading information, whether they are religious information or information that when people act upon it can cause them serious harm, such as the medical information or health examples that we just mentioned. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The third most frequently committed sin is vulgarity, using obscene language. And it's so unfortunate that growing up in this country, and I don't like to generalize, but growing up in this country, we find that especially, for many of our youth, and here I'm not saying that everyone is like that or everyone who's, in this country uses this, but I found it commonly used in a lot of places as if it is part of the English grammar, that they have to include a bad word in their sentences. And we find that sometimes there's a good message that's being circulated, by somebody, for example, speaking, giving an advice about something, but in their message they're using vulgar language. They're using bad words. So again, as a person who's using these social media platforms, I don't intend to promote the vulgarity, but I like the message and I want to support that message. Again, this is not permissible. Because as we have in Islam a rule that says, Al-ghayatu la tubarriru al-wasila, ends do not justify means. Just because there is a good message in this, but the means is, are invalid or violate the Sharia laws, violate Islam. I cannot share something that incorporates vulgarity, that incorporates obscene language. Our beloved Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, as quoted by Shaykh al-Kulayni in al-Kafi, he says, Allah despises the speaker of obscene language. Do not underestimate how bad this is and how detrimental it is to our spiritual well-being when a person is engaged in bad words. Even listening to them has an effect on our spiritual growth. Because some people think, I'm not saying it, I'm just reading the post, I'm just listening to it, but how much it affects your subconscious, these are things that we may not be aware of. Another example is engaging in illegitimate relationships with the opposite gender. Now that is one thing that is frequently committed via social media platforms. When a person from the opposite gender, let's say a male for example, friends a female and starts to have a relationship with that female under no legitimate guidelines in Islam, it's not an Islamic relationship, just a relationship that is based on, for example, the dating concept, right? Just online dating. And doing that without any religious umbrella is, of course, haram in Islam. It is not permissible. And we find that some people think that this is normal. I'm not doing anything wrong because all I'm doing is talking. All I'm doing is texting. All I'm doing is just, commenting on their post, positive comments, they're commenting back. I am messaging them privately, they are messaging me privately, and so on and so forth, not realizing that all this falls under haram interaction with the opposite gender. Another problem that goes along those lines is the concept of flirting, which is haram according to many of our ulama. When a sister posts something, for example, and a brother comes and says, you look beautiful today, that is a form of flirting, and it's not permissible in Islam according to many of our ulama, even if it does not entail something haram or amount to something that is haram. So we have to be careful of these things and how we make use of social media in this regard. The fifth one, which is related mainly to our sisters, is violating the laws of hijab. And this is important, my dears, because some people assume that the rulings and the laws of hijab only pertain to the real world. But in the virtual setting, in the cyberspace, it's okay. I don't have to worry about hijab. Meaning I can appear with my makeup as a female or with my incomplete hijab in a video or in a photo and post that. That, according to our ulama, is not permissible and a violation of the rulings of hijab. Every sister who has reached the age of bulugh must cover her entire body with exception to her face and arms until the wrist. Now, do we make up these rulings? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one responsible for these rulings. So if we feel that this is a restriction, this is too much, we are not making these rulings up. Our ulama are not making them up. Rather, they are derived directly from the Holy Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Ai, peace and blessings be upon them all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says in the Holy Quran, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنْ, and they must not display their ornaments, of course, in front of the non-mahram men. And when you're in a public setting, like any social media platform, and you post a picture while you're in your, wearing your ornaments, maybe you were at a wedding and you were wearing your makeup and you had different ornaments on, and you had a nice picture that you like. It's okay, you can keep that picture to yourself, share it with people in your family, your sisters, your brothers, your father, your children, and so on and so forth, those who are mahram to you. But to post it on social media and allow everyone to look at it is a problem in Islam. I want to conclude by this point, my dears. Our use of social media has to be moderate. It cannot be excessive. The use of social media cannot be at the expense of our duties towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and towards people. We have two different types of duties and obligations. That which is towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as our salah, our siyam, and so on and so forth, and that which is towards people. Our spouses have rights upon us. Our children have rights upon us. Our parents have rights upon us. Our community members have rights upon us. So when we become so excessive and so addicted to using these social media platforms to the extent that we're no longer attentive to these duties, it becomes a problem. Because if I fall short in my duty towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my prayer is no longer being recited in the prime time because I'm busy with responding to someone or doing different things or posting something or whatever I am doing. Of course that becomes a form of istighfaf. And our beloved Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, as quoted in multiple sources, he says, لا تنال شفاعتنا مستخفا بصلاته. He says our intercession, that special intercession on the Day of Judgment, is not given for a person who is neglectful of their salah. Now look, he's not saying a person who does not pray. No, this person is outside to begin with. No, he's talking about someone who prays but they don't care too much about the salah. They have istighfaf, they have negligence. They don't care what time they pray. Whether they pray before the end of the time in 2 minutes, whether or not, it's not even a big deal. It's a very secondary thing to them. This is a person who's deprived from the shafa'ah of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. We have to be very careful with that. The use of social media cannot take us away from our children. Our children need our attention, especially those who have little children. Little children, when you don't give them the right attention, you are hurting them. Whether we know it or not, it indirectly affects their mental health. And there are studies that have shown that. When a child calls upon their father or mother, they want their attention. They want their response. And when they don't get that response, they feel bad. And this remains in their heart. And it hurts them in the long run. But what is worse than that, my dears, is that when a child has to call upon their father or their mother, their parent in general, and they don't get a response because their mother or their father is no longer there. Sayyida Ruqayya, the 4-year-old child, also known in this community or other communities as Bibi Sakina, was a person, a child who was very attached to her father, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There was a special bond between that little child of Imam Hussein and her father, Imam Hussein, Ruqayya and Hussein alayhi salam. When she lost her father in Karbala, throughout the way, all the way to Sham, all she wanted was her father. She keeps asking her Amma, Aunt Zainab, where is my father? I want to see my father. Until they arrive at Sham, and when they arrive at Sham, things get worse. Because there, she sees that she's in a foreign land, and people are mistreating them. And when a girl feels that she needs safety and security and help, the first person that comes to her mind is her father. So she's saying, where are you, Baba Hussein? Father Hussein, where are you? She goes to sleep crying. According to one narration, she sees him in her dream. And when she sees him, she's so pleased. Now she finally saw her father Hussein. Father Hussein, where have you been? I've been looking for you. All of a sudden, she wakes up and realizes that this was a dream. She begins to cry and weep. Her voice becomes so loud. The women and children begin to cry for her crying and weeping. Ruqayya, what is wrong? She says, my father, I want my father. I want my Baba Hussein to come right now. They say that Yazid heard the loud cries and weeping. He says, what is going on out there? What is going on with these children, with these women? They say to him, there is a little girl for Hussein who's asking for her father. Yazid alayhi al-la'na says, take her father to her. We want to go to sleep. I don't want to hear about her crying. So they put the head of our beloved Imam on a plate and they take it towards Lady Sakina Ruqayya alayha salam. They bring it to her. Some people are thinking they brought food to her because this is a covered plate. As soon as they remove the cover, she sees the head of our beloved Imam. The head is filled with blood. She looks at it. She hugs it, she kisses it, she begins to cry. She says, Father Hussein, who has done this to you? Why is your head severed? Baba Hussein, let me tell you what happened to me. Baba, they whipped me, they hurt me throughout the way to Sham. Baba, I kept calling for you. You were not there to respond to me. Father Hussein, who has done this to you? Father Hussein, will I ever see you again? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim.
Assalamu alayki ya sayyidatana Sakina. Alayki tahiyyat wa salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Azizan girami, آج ہم لوگ آئے ہیں دلاسا دینے کے لیے. ہمارا سلام ہو جناب رباب پر جس نے اپنے دونوں بچے کھوئے. ایک کربلا اور ایک شام میں رکھ کر آئی تھی مدینہ. عزیزان کرام، یہ سکینہ وہ تھی کہ کہتے ہیں کہ امام حسین نماز تہجد میں اس نے سکینہ کو مانگا تھا اللہ کے پاس اور کہتے تھے یا اللہ مجھے ایک ایسی بیٹی دینا جو میرے سینے پہ سو کر مجھے سکون دے. اللہ اکبر. جب امام جا رہے تھے آپ نے تو سنا ہے روزے عاشور کو کس طرح سے جناب سکینہ کو امام حسین سمجھاتے تھے اور کہتے تھے کہ اے سکینہ اپنی ماں کا خیال رکھنا. اس لیے کہ علی اصغر کو جو ان کے ساتھ سوتا تھا ہمیشہ امام نے کہا بیٹی آج کی رات کے بعد تم اپنے بابا کے ساتھ سونا. عزیزان گرامی، جناب سکینہ ایک وقت آتا ہے کہ جب یہ لوگ کوفے سے شام جا رہے تھے امام علی زین العابدین فرماتے ہیں کہ ایک جگہ پر انہوں نے میرے توق کو کھولا اور میرے زنجیروں کو کھولا اور کچھ پانی لائے جو جناب سکینہ نے بڑھ کر وہ پانی لے کر دوڑی اپنے بھیا کے پاس اور کہا بھیا ایک مرتبہ وہ پانی امام کے پیروں میں ڈالا. امام نے کہا اے بہن یہ تو کیا کرتی؟ تو بہن نے کہا بھیا آپ مجھے کہتے ہیں کہ آپ کا پاؤں میں اتنے نشان ہو گئے ہیں خون جاری ہے تو میں نے سوچا کہ آپ کے پاؤں میں پانی ریڑوں. عزاداران حسین امام زین العابدین ہمیشہ کہتے تھے کہ مجھے جناب سکینہ کے جو سوال تھے مجھے زندگی بھر یاد رہ گئے. ایک مرتبہ شام کے قید خانے میں جناب سکینہ فجر کے وقت دیکھتی ہے کہ کچھ پرندے اڑ رہے ہیں، تو ایک مرتبہ اپنے بھیا کو کہتی ہے کہ بھیا یہ پرندے کہاں جا رہے ہیں؟ تو امام نے کہا یہ تو اپنے رزق کے لیے جا رہے ہیں۔ جب شام ہوئی تو وہی پرندے واپس آ رہے تھے، تو ایک مرتبہ سکینہ نے کہا بھیا یہ پرندے کہاں جا رہے ہیں؟ تو امام نے کہا یہ اپنے گھروں میں جا رہے ہیں۔ تو سکینہ نے کہا بھیا ارے وہ وقت کب آئے گا کہ ہم بھی اپنے گھروں میں جا کر رہے؟ لیکن یہ سکینہ کو معلوم نہیں تھا کہ گھر تو نصیب نہ ہوگا، لیکن زندان میں قبر نصیب ہوگی۔ عزیزان گرامی، جب جناب زینب اور امام علی زین العابدین واپس جانے کی تیاری کر رہے تھے، تو ایک مرتبہ جناب رباب کو نہیں دیکھا، تو جناب زینب نے کہا میری بھابھی کہاں ہے؟ تو امام زین العابدین نے کہا آئیے میرے ساتھ۔ ایک مرتبہ امام نے جناب زینب کو لے کر شام کے قید خانے میں گئے۔ وہاں دیکھتے ہیں کہ جناب رباب ارے جناب سکینہ کی قبر پر اپنا سر رکھ کر رو رہی ہے۔ تو جناب زینب نے کہا اے رباب وقت آ گیا ہے چلنے کے لیے۔ رباب نے کہا کہ میں کیا کروں گی مدینے جا کر، ارے میری بچی کو میں یہاں چھوڑ کر جا رہی ہوں۔ تو جناب زینب نے کہا تھا کہ گھبرانا نہیں بھابھی، ایک وقت وہ آئے گا کہ زینب بھی سکینہ کے قریب رہے گی تا قیامت تک۔ مجبور ہوں بہنا تمہیں دفنا نہیں سکتا، مجبور ہوں بہنا تمہیں دفنا نہیں سکتا، قیدی ہوں سکینہ میں کفن لا نہیں سکتا، تابوت اٹھانے کو نہ اکبر ہے نہ عباس، میں اہل وطن کو یہاں بلوا نہیں سکتا، لاچار ہے سجاد سے کیوں روٹھ گئے تو، بیمار گوہر آپ کو دلوا نہیں سکتا، دروں کی جب سے تیری سب پوشت ہے زخمی، مجبور ہوں بہنا تمہیں غسل نہیں دے سکتا۔ ماتم حسین، حسین یا حسین۔